Have you ever judged someone in just a few seconds, only to realize later that you were completely wrong? If this story teaches you something, take a moment to like this video and subscribe for more powerful African stories that stay with you long after the end. The afternoon sun hung low over the busy streets of Akure. Traders called out to customers, motorcycles squeezed through traffic, and children laughed as they chased one another between small roadside shops. Among them walked 19-year-old Amaka. She was beautiful, confident, and knew it. Her social media pages were full of pictures showing expensive clothes, stylish hairstyles, and weekends spent at fancy restaurants. Everyone around her admired her confidence, but those who knew her well also knew something else. Amaka had a habit of looking down on people she considered poor. That afternoon, she was walking with two friends when they noticed an old woman sitting quietly beside a worn-out wooden table. On the table were a few oranges, ground nuts, and bananas that hardly anyone seemed interested in buying. The old woman wore faded clothes. Her slippers were almost torn apart, and a small scarf covered her grey hair. As Amaka walked past, the old woman smiled warmly. "My daughter, would you like to buy some fruit?" Amaka looked at the table and burst into laughter. "You really think people still buy from tables like this?" she said loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Her friends laughed too. "You should just go home and rest, Mama. Nobody wants these old fruits." A few people nearby turned to look. Some shook their heads, but no one said anything. The old woman simply smiled. "There is nothing wrong with honest work, my daughter," she replied gently. But Amaka rolled her eyes and walked away, still laughing. The old woman watched her disappear into the crowd without another word. 3 days later, life changed. Amaka had been invited to interview for a graduate trainee position at one of the biggest companies in the state. She had been preparing for weeks. "This is my chance," she told her mother excitedly. "Everything is finally falling into place." On the morning of the interview, she dressed carefully, checked her documents several times, and left home early. When she arrived at the company's impressive headquarters, dozens of applicants were already waiting. Everyone looked nervous. Some revised their notes. Others whispered prayers. After almost an hour, a receptionist walked in. "The final interviewer has just arrived," she announced. Everyone stood up respectfully. A sleek black SUV pulled into the compound. The driver stepped out first and opened the back door. The applicants watched curiously. Then, someone slowly stepped out. Amaka froze. Her heart almost stopped. It was the same old woman she had laughed at only 3 days earlier. The same scarf, the same gentle face. Only this time, she wore an elegant traditional outfit, simple but expensive. Staff members rushed toward her with smiles. "Good morning, chairwoman." "Good morning, ma. We've prepared everything." Amaka could barely breathe. One applicant whispered, "That's Mrs. Adeyemi, the founder's mother. They say she quietly visits markets and communities every week to support small traders and observe how people treat others." Amaka suddenly remembered every cruel word she had spoken. She wanted the ground to open beneath her. Inside the interview room, each candidate answered questions before leaving. When Amaka's turn came, she walked in with trembling hands. The panel members greeted her politely. At the center of the table sat the old woman. She looked exactly as calm as she had at the roadside. Amaka lowered her eyes. I'm sorry," she whispered before anyone asked a question. The room became silent. The old woman smiled kindly. "For what?" Amaka felt tears gathering. "I judged you because of your appearance. I embarrassed you in public. I thought your clothes defined your value." The old woman nodded slowly. "That happens more often than you think." Another interviewer looked surprised. "You know each other?" The old woman answered quietly. "We met recently." She turned back to Amaka. "Tell me something." Amaka nodded. If someone treated your mother the way I treated you, how would you feel? That question hit harder than any accusation could have. She imagined her own mother, a hard-working school teacher who sometimes wore simple clothes after work. Her chest tightened. I would be heartbroken, she admitted. The old woman smiled again. The purpose of this interview isn't only to find intelligent people. Intelligence can be taught. Character is much harder to build. Amaka couldn't stop crying. I understand. The interview continued, but this time it wasn't about qualifications alone. They spoke about humility, about mistakes, about growth, about how people reveal themselves when they think no one important is watching. Several days later, the results were released. Amaka wasn't selected. She was disappointed, but strangely, she wasn't angry. For the first time in years, she understood why. Instead of blaming the company, she decided to change herself. She began volunteering every weekend at a local community center. She greeted street cleaners, security guards, market women, and elderly neighbors with genuine respect. Not because someone might be watching, because she had finally learned that every person carries a story you cannot see. Almost a year later, she received another interview invitation. This time at a different company. As she entered the reception area, she noticed a cleaner struggling to carry a heavy bucket. Without thinking twice, Amaka walked over. Let me help you. The cleaner smiled with gratitude. She had no idea that someone standing nearby had quietly noticed everything. Sometimes, life doesn't test us with difficult questions. Sometimes, it simply watches how we treat people who seem unable to give us anything in return. And often, those are the moments that reveal who we truly are. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs the reminder that kindness costs nothing, but its value can change a life. Subscribe for more emotional African stories that inspire, challenge, and stay with you long after the story ends.